What is going on, everyone? We are back. Today we have Rich Cabrera from one of the largest Web3 gaming DAOs out there, Ready Player DAO, which is an incredible platform that is able to bring together a lot of different people to enable a lot of like investment in these new experiences for people to get into the play to earn ecosystem. They recently raised 10.2 million at 150 million valuation, which is incredible. So today we're going to be talking about just a little bit intro into like how DAOs actually work, like why this is different, and a lot of the innovation and opportunity that they are providing in the space, and a lot of the innovation that they're bringing to play to earn, and what this means for Web3. So with that, I will bring on Rich. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Nice to
Uh,
meet you.
yeah, good to meet you as well, man. Thank you for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Always love to talk about what's happening in space and DAOs in general.
Yeah, of course. So we've got you on. So you're going to be to start this off. So you're going to be speaking at NFT Expoverse out in July and out in LA, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome.
Gonna try to enlighten people on Web3 gaming and where we see the space moving and what's happening there. I think
Yeah.
there's still a lot of uncertainty and misinformation and uh, other projects that maybe not performed as well that um, I think a lot of the issues that have come from those are going to be cleared up. So
Yeah, and so I do want to like actually dive into some of those, because I think what's interesting is that with Web3, like it opened up all of these new possibilities to what it can mean for community and engagement, and the way that people can come together to organize to participate in these new gaming environments beyond what's just there. And the philosophy, I think, for a lot of it kind of transcends gaming into kind of a lot of larger possibilities besides that. But before we jump in to all the nitty gritty, I would love to hear just a quick intro of yourself, a little bit of your background, how you got into starting this amazing DAO that's seen incredible growth. Like what kind of led you into this idea, and then from there we can take it into where we're headed.
yeah, absolutely. So I come from the tech space, and before jumping into Web3, I was working for a company called Red Hat, which is very deep in the open source world. And I was contributing to projects there and working with several government agencies such as USDA, Department of Justice, Department of State, several smaller sub agencies like FBI, GSA, et cetera, and helping them modernize their technology stack, taking them to the cloud, taking them to hybrid on-prem infrastructure. We don't have to dive deep into that, but basically the core of it is open source and cutting edge technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of has a hand in hand easy transition into Web3, and what's happening over there, because decentralization and open source, the background thesis is essentially the same thing, right? Um, Taking away centralized authority, take away centralized thought processes, and you start getting, you know, better, less concentrated strategy from people that come from different backgrounds and different viewpoints. Um, and that's the whole thesis around that side of things as well. And then with gaming, I've been a lifelong avid gamer. I think a lot of people are, right. And I was actually following like Mark Cuban and Alexis Ohanian, more so Alexis, on what he was doing ever since he started Reddit. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Mark Cuban, as we all know, is a great investor. So I like to play around with stuff in my free time, and saw that they had made an investment in Axie Infinity uh, around March of last year, and saw like a few videos floating around about people in the Philippines playing video games and earning money, and something about uh, NFTs and asset ownership. And I was like, okay, I've heard of NFTs before, but I thought they were just like pictures of bit like 8-bit people and
Right.
rock
Yep.
stuff. So I was like, all right, let me check this out and see what how NFTs get into games. So I started jumping into Axie Infinity and started realizing what was happening. Started like a mini scholarship program in a guild,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of turned into the realization of like, okay, something legitimate is happening here. I think this is actually a big deal. Let me see if there's like other people that are interested in this. So I want to try to raise from like investors and had a few conversations from that, which turned into why don't we just start a DAO and use this DAO to elevate Web3 gaming and be a part of the revolution that's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got to where we are,
And here we are.
founding Ready Player DAO, right?
Right. So when you, I think that some people might not know. So when we talk about like Axie Infinity, right? Like that was one of the flagship movements into this concept of like play to earn, right? So play to earn is where you're able to actually participate and you perform actions and you like kind of like people might say like grind away within the game to unlock items that have increasingly higher value within the ecosystem itself. But then you can sell those, right? You can sell those for actual currency or that you can trade into fiat, right? And so you can make, and I know that people for a time in the Philippines were like making full livings, or they probably still are making full livings like playing this game, which a lot of people might look at that and be like, well, that's crazy. But I don't think as many people know, like right now, people grind away in Fortnite and Call of Duty for skins that they, once the game, they come out with a new version, all of that work is basically lost. Um, so with all of this, you're creating this new vehicle and this new way and this engagement structure for people to play, but also be rewarded for the time that they're putting in. And what I thought was interesting about your side is that some of the these games, these play to earn games, a lot of times there can be a high level barrier of entry for people to get the items that they need in order to win. So a thought process I'm assuming that you might have had and some of my research into Ready Player DAO, which I think is a fantastic name by the way, was that if we can get people together to like pool together their money or their high value items, you can like lease those out, right? So that me as someone that doesn't get the opportunity to play that often, I can still contribute and I can still have fun because I can have access to this community to like leverage some of that. Is that kind of on track?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what Axie Infinity did was prove like a base model
Mm-hmm.
and how asset ownership can work and can look in games and how you can tie NFTs to have more utility than just a JPEG or a picture of something. And from that model is sprouting a lot of other very promising models that are going to have more solid, token structures and NFT economies.
Mm-hmm.
So the one you mentioned is like the asset lending, right? And a lot of guilds popped up because of that. Um, but I think there's going to be a new model, which is still probably going to incorporate stuff like that. But I think we're going to see a lot more um, hybrid economies. So what I mean by that is like Axie's economy was fairly open, and even they're shifting to this new model of a combination of soul-bound earned resources and
Mm-hmm.
tradable earned resources. So by soul-bound, just like in-game, you can't sell like what we see in most games today.
Right.
And that's to prevent like a very simple extraction, which is what happened to Axie's economy. Um, so I think as we start moving towards that, the guild structure is also going to become less profitable. But I think what's going to happen is you're going to see guilds shift to be a lot more similar to what we saw in games like World of Warcraft or RuneScape, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
where it was actually a collection of players trying to work together to achieve a certain goal to acquire like higher level assets that are more out of reach by individuals. So like one of the things that we're shifting towards is creating that kind of guild community surrounding specific games that we are invested in or partnered with,
Mm-hmm.
and creating a conducive environment to our gamers and our players to work towards those goals and take on their achievements. And then obviously we want to acquire the high value assets to be able to give back to those gamers to play with and make use of as well. So in that regard, I think there's still a lot of room for that thesis and that asset lending structure.
Mm-hmm.
uh, but I think as we move to more healthy and sustainable economies, we might see less and less of that, and more of the traditional guild models of players just banding together um, to just crush it at whatever game they're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean the whole concept. So I play a good bit of video games myself, and it never dawned on me how angry I was that like I would spend all this time unlocking stuff in a game, and then it would sunset and a new version would come out and like everything's gone, um, and that ability to and like all that hard work is lost, and that
Yeah.
ability to be able to create communities and be able to buy, sell, and trade creates these whole new engagement structures for games beyond just the end game, like peer to peer interaction that's there. And having the freedom to to transact, actually, to one of your quotes, the freedom to transact is the real core value add that blockchain brings. And I think that's so true. I mean, so do you see the future of this? And I feel like this is one of those like very ephemeral kind of like concepts of that, the ability to create and do work within one game that then can translate to another game, right? So I might be able to take the work that I've done in game A and either sell those assets for money that I can then reinvest in game B, or they can be traded, kind of across from A to B. I mean, do you see that as like a direction that a lot of this play to earn, kind of economy and business models are moving?
Yeah, yeah. I see a lot of people talk about interoperability. So people to like take assets, even if they're not originally gaming assets. Like people have worked towards incorporating like Bored Apes and stuff into the games they're building, and other PFP projects that didn't organically come from a game
Mm-hmm.
into their games, right? And across other games. I think there's still like a few technical challenges and hurdles that we need to overcome. Like we don't really have a standardized metadata format, and this is like something that will have to come from the open source world or be open sourced for people to build with it or build on top of it.
Right.
But once we have like that template, we'll call it, of metadata that people can use, anyone coming in with a new NFT for gaming or design for gaming, or even a PFP, as long as they follow that metadata format, should be able to port a game
Mm-hmm.
into their game or the next one, or port the NFT into their game or the next one. Um, and it's gonna boil down to like the game engine on how that's rendered and how that looks specifically. But as long as like we have uh, a metadata format that also has like options to extend it in certain ways to provide more characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely possible, and it's being talked about a lot. And I know a few projects that are trying to put that like standardized format out.
Mm-hmm.
It just needs widespread adoption as well, right? And then the other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to circle back to is like when you are playing a game and a new version comes out, you don't get to keep those assets, right? But what we see a lot in games today is like seasons and battle passes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use assets from the old season and the new season, right?
Right.
One of the things that I am hoping to see come from a lot of these Web3 games um, is building out more of an ecosystem to where you can have your NFT assets from the original game drop,
Mm-hmm.
similar to like a season, be used in the next game drop, but also that game drop might have its own NFT assets, right?
Right.
So like, you could have potentially, let's use like GTA 5, for example. You build up your character, you have them like stylized how you want them, etc. And then GTA 6 drops with new characters for its storyline, story arc. But you can also bring out GTA 5 because it matches that metadata standard, and it has
Mm-hmm.
your achievements, etc. We'll probably see wallet based reputation score that can be transferred across as well. So
Right.
the way I see it is, you see these games start re-platforming their games over and over again or remastering them.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, I'm envisioning more of like additional game mode drops, more of like a I don't want to overuse the term, but metaverse of games that they've developed within their game studio that all interact and interoperate with each other. Some of these words are tongue twisters.
Yeah, I know, I know, and that I mean, so that's like such I mean, it's always so good to keep in perspective, right? That like they're the future that may seem so like really difficult right now about all this interoperability between these different games is something that it's almost inevitable that because the customer expectation will be there. But you know, to to circle back somewhat too, and kind of keep it around the topic on the DAO thing, is that you mentioned earlier that when you were getting started, you know, there had to be a point, or was there a point where it was I should start this as a traditional company, right? Or do I start this as a DAO? And like what, like why? And I think a lot of people that watch this might be like, well, why did Rich start this as a DAO and not just do this as an LLC, you know, and call it a day? Like what was some of the motivation and like the benefits that you've seen of having a DAO structure to build RPD versus just a typical company one?
Yeah, so this goes back to my experience in open source, right?
Yeah.
We all have different strengths and weaknesses. We all have different experience and backgrounds that benefit us. And mine was not starting a new company, right? Um, I don't think we would have taken off the way or have the like great minds within our DAO that we do today if I had done traditional like hedge fund or investment fund to
Mm-hmm.
take on investment and try to go that way, right? I didn't have a background as a founder, but I have other other co-founders within Ready Player DAO who do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have people in there who have worked in creative at Apple. We have people who worked in media, people that worked in Web2 esports scenes
Mm-hmm.
that are leading, you know, the esports side of things, etc. And there's a great book that I would recommend to anybody listening who wants to kind of learn what the idea is behind a DAO and what that can look like. It's called Starfish and a Spider.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I actually have it right here. Starfish and the Spider. Um, and it's basically, I'll just, I don't know, my blur is not going to capture it. But it basically talks about decentralization in organizations
Mm-hmm.
and how that has worked historically, because this is not the first time there's been, you know, decentralized entities.
Right.
Um, it references like a lot of uh, black market, not black market, but what was it called? The
Silk Road.
yeah, Silk Road and a lot of the different entities that popped up around there, and how when they tried to shut it down, you know, a new server would pop up in Finland or wherever else, et cetera, right? That's the advantage of decentralization is if it's truly decentralized, it's owned by the community. And
Mm-hmm.
if you take out one person from the community, guess what? There's like 200 more. So like if there's an issue within the DAO where I don't know or don't have the expertise to handle something, guess what? There's 57 members in our DAO. Someone is probably going to have either connection or the expertise to do it themselves,
Right.
or give feedback or suggestions on how to approach it. And that's kind of how we've been running the DAO. Although at the end of the book, it talks about hybrid decentralized organizations. So I like to call our DAO a hybrid DAO because it's not pure decentralization, which I think can lead to a little bit of madness. And I know there's other DAOs that have dealt with this in terms of like, how do you incentivize people to get things done?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you manage expectations on timeline and delivery of those things that need to get done? So we have like a pseudo structure of leads that will take point and push certain areas of that require delivery on certain items.
Right.
Um, and that's kind of like the hybrid aspect of like here's general direction that the DAO voted on,
Right.
and then this person's taking point on it and might be working with two others, and then they'll, you know, during like our weekly DAO call, we'll give updates on where that approach has been, and minor decisions can be handled by that subgroup of DAO members as well. And we found that to be the most efficient model in terms of staying as decentralized as possible, but also having some structure.
Mm-hmm. No, and that I mean, so that's what I've been seeing too, and I'm glad that you brought that up because a question that I think that I get asked a lot, and I know that comes up in the comments a lot, is that I think a lot of people have the misconception that when you say DAO, they take it all the way to like the maximalist, like fully decentralized. You don't know who anyone is. Like it's just a fucking nightmare going on of everyone like running around in circles. But that there actually is like you can basically extract the upside that a DAO gives you and abstract like the upside of like traditional business and like merge those together, which allows you to actually get things done, but also has these cool new incentive drivers and ways to bring in people that typically might not go or be able to participate in whatever fashion with a traditional organization. And that's really fascinating. So the how how do you like what are some like recommendations that you have for like incentivizing people to get things done within a DAO, right? And I had read a really interesting. I'm trying to find the quote now. I should have had this pulled up, but it's basically around DAOs that a DAO kind of can have two. It can be measured in two ways. One, is it healthy, right? So a healthy DAO is one that incentivizes people to participate, but a successful DAO is one that incentivizes people to perform task, right? And participation versus performing task is two very different things. So when you look at how you've been able to design Ready Player DAO to incentivize these individuals to do task, like what are some, and you don't have to give away exact one, but like so what are like some guiding principles or some tactics or things that you've implemented?
Yeah. So to your point about like not going full in on one solution versus the other, we actually have a very wide berth mix of solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a combination of full-time, part-time DAO members and employees that are being paid at some capacity. We had like those pseudo leads where we had them incentivized through like ETH rewards,
Mm-hmm.
bounties, and then we just have really passionate members that want to see the DAO succeed and to turn into something massive.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have paid contractors that aren't
Right.
members of the DAO that we hired. So it's a combination of like every approach under the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's because people are coming from every different walk of life and scenario under the moon, right?
Right.
So like me myself, I quit my job to stand up this DAO and run this DAO and make sure it's the most successful thing that I can make it be, right? So naturally, I'm going to need a source of income, so I fall into like the full time participant bucket. There's people that have their own project that they're working on the side, um, or are wealthy individuals where you know there's only going to be a very very high amount of financial incentive you can provide them to get them to make sense to use their time in the DAO. But there are other non-financial incentives that you can use
Mm-hmm.
uh, to incentivize them to partake in a DAO. And also everybody in this DAO. So the other thing that makes it a little bit different than some other DAOs is it is a closed DAO, so everybody has a stake in this DAO
Mm-hmm.
and is invested. So there's a natural incentive for everyone to try to make it as successful as possible.
Right.
Um, but there's also projects that they're extremely excited about that they bring in and they
Mm-hmm.
will push forward themselves because they brought in or they invested in separately from the DAO, or think it's going to be the next big thing, and that's how it works out. They lead the efforts on that. They set up the calls, they set up the meetings, they do the due diligence, etc. So there's a few different ways to incentivize people that aren't strictly financial. It could just be, a passion of theirs um, to do a lot of that work. And then touching back on like the going full, thesis versus not at all, and hitting that middle point. It's exactly like how we run our DAO, and I think it's a huge topic in terms of governance in general, right? People talk
Mm-hmm.
about Web3 and governance and their governance tokens and think that it means that it's going to be like a lawless,
Yeah.
wild west of proposals being put forward and voted up and down, and people are going to take over the treasury. It's like, that's not at all how it has to be, right? You have this middle ground of like, here's what like governance needs to look like for this scenario. This is what it's allowed to approach. This is when it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually not needed for this very minimal use case. So we won't go like full on chain. Everyone has to vote to move something forward. So there's
Right.
also that aspect of it too. Knowing that there's 57 members that are all generally, most of them are doing other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to force everyone to show up every single day to vote on menial tasks either.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so there's the concept of lending votes out, but also off chain, smaller consensus models to
Mm-hmm.
get things passed as well.
Got it. No, and that's excellent that you bring that up too, because that I some of the people that I talk to around DAOs, like they have a gridlock in their mind that every single decision has to be done by a vote, right? And that's just not the case, because if you did that, literally nothing would ever happen.
Yeah.
But then it feels like you start to walk potentially a bit of a line where it's like, so are you still a DAO if you're not having everything 100% done by a vote on chain, right? And not everyone's anonymous. Or now are you kind of a company, but you're saying that there is this hybrid model that falls into the middle, and like we need to maybe come up with a new name for something that is a hybrid DAO, like a
Yeah.
how.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that's touched up in the book I referenced as well. But you have practically like mini sub DAOs within the DAO, right? So
Mm-hmm.
like we have a mini group of it's like separated by the roles in Discord. Everybody uses companies being ran on Discord. Um,
It's
but
amazing.
like the creative squad, and then we have the deal squad, and those are DAOs within themselves. We have like the fast team. So like if we were making a move on something that's less than X ETH or X dollars, right? That's not worth pinging everybody in the DAO, demand them get in. Like if it's a fast paced movement that needs to get done because the market's moving,
Mm-hmm.
we have like a fast team which pulls people from all over the world so that no matter when it's pinged, we can make sure someone's there to have a discussion or vote on it, as well as different backgrounds and different expertise. Um, and like that's its own little sub DAO, right? And they can vote on minor movements that the broader DAO had approved on previously.
Mm-hmm.
So like you start with a blank template and you say, this is not working for us. Let's set forward, new proposals to make this more efficient. And that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are today of like these mini sub DAOs. We have
Mm-hmm.
like experts in creative working on our website and any art that we're going to drop or collaborations. We have experts on esports that are going out there and trying to sign content creators and top players for the games that we're investing in. We
Mm-hmm.
have, a bunch of funds that are in there that are bringing a bunch of deal flow that are on the deal squad. So these are all like mini sub DAOs that are inherently more efficient because they don't have the overhead of the broader DAO, but any major strategic movement or um, pool of funds from our Gnosis safe to
Mm-hmm.
invest in those deals or spend money on a content creator or pay someone for marketing will have to be done by the larger DAO.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. That's fascinating. And that, huh, very cool. And I never thought about like it breaking down right into that concept of like sub DAOs that make up the DAO itself, right?
Right.
And then you can that way you can delegate decision making power still to a group that has to have weighted input, but it doesn't bog down the system as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Because like the initial founding of the DAO, there was definitely times where it's like, okay, we have like gridlock in the DAO because the guy in Europe's asleep right now, and the market's moving, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, stuff's happening, or there's even a deal that we went through within like 24 hours, and like half of us were at a conference. It was like during NFT NYC. Ended up being like an amazing investment, um, but it needed that like very fast paced movement, and that was one of the pain points. We were like, okay, we gotta figure out if we're gonna go forward with this or not. But like half the members aren't here because
Mm-hmm.
they're at this conference, or
Right.
busy, or something else. So we realized that these were things that needed to be solved for.
Gotcha. No, that's amazing, man. And we're gonna have to chat again more around, I think, specifically like organizational structure within the DAO, because I don't think a lot of people, either one, don't take the time to look into it, or two, there's just really isn't that much literature or really, deep dives done into how these DAOs are truly organized beyond what just gets kind of like hyped up in the media of that, like, oh, they're a DAO, but no one takes the time to understand, a lot of the thought and complexity that goes in underneath that to make it an actual successful organization. I think a lot of times general media will latch and be like, oh, it's blockchain making it successful. It's like, no, 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 no. There's a lot more to all of this than just that. But with that, man, I appreciate you stopping by so much. This was incredibly, incredibly insightful, and a topic that I know that our audience like loves to learn more about. So if anyone wants to follow you or keep up to date, is there any like social channels or places that they should check out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ready Player Rich on Twitter, and the DAO is at Ready Player DAO. I'm very active on Twitter, so that's probably the best place to keep in touch. Um, so yeah, look out for us there. We'll have some updates coming over the next month.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
See ya.
Yeah.
And that is Rich from Ready Player DAO. Amazing stuff. Like it really, really is. I mean, if you don't know much about DAOs, or if you're really just taking DAOs for face value from what's come out of the media, there's so much more that goes into the mechanics underneath it to make it actually functional and not just a bunch of people running around with their like chickens with their head cut off. Like there are formalities that are within that still capture the essence of like decentralization and that ability to have a participatory kind of workforce that is part of the larger whole. So check out the book. I'll put it in the link below, Starfish and the Spider. So come read it, check it out. If you're going to be at NFT Expoverse, we look forward to seeing you there. Rich is going to be speaking as well. And with that, Keith, let's run the outro.